Welcome, everybody, to the American Space Museum. I'm Marquette, and we're so glad you're with us today to stay curious. Beside me is astronaut Mike Baker. Hi, Mike.
Hello, Mark. Good to see you.
Close friends, which maybe I'll be one day, call him Bakes.
Yes.
How long you've had that nickname a while, right?
Yeah, it's the Navy days.
Well, we're looking at a two-time pilot, two-time commander of our wonderful American space shuttles. You were on Endeavour, Columbia, and twice on Atlantis, correct?
Yes, correct.
And we're going to talk about some of that. Mike loves coming to the Space Coast and telling you his story out there at the Kennedy Visitors Complex, where our good friend and astronaut wrangler Nick Thomas has become a good friend of yours, I'm sure. You've eaten a few meals with Nick together.
Yes.
On there. You've smoked a cigar with old Nick?
No, have not.
All right. He likes doing that. But Nick is going to be on our show once a month, and he does a program on there. And this is tape recorded, and we're going to kind of hit a little bit about Bake's career here and some of the what I find fascinating, how he was very involved with the Russian Soyuz spacecraft putting Americans on our space station, or we wouldn't have had no way to get there.
Right.
And you had your fingers on that. And but first, I want to ask you a little bit about what you think about our museum walking around here for the first
fantastic.
time.
There's lots of interesting artifacts that you guys have here, and I'm very impressed.
Good. I'm gonna put the microphone there closer there, so try to speak up a little bit there.
Okay.
Most of us come out there and see these astronaut encounters. We really love them. We can't thank you enough for your time to do that, because every day at Kennedy Space Center, you can hear an astronaut tell their story, answer questions. There's a lot of extra VIP things that you can tag along with your admission. But that's a good program, isn't
It's a
it?
great
You really
program.
enjoy that.
Yeah.
What keeps you coming back, Mike?
Well, I think it's important. I always say I guess to date, there's been like 600 people that have flown in space from all over the
Yep.
world, right? Which is not very many. And I think it's an experience that we need to tell as many people as we can about the experience.
602 humans have orbited the Earth, and you got a bunch of what Marty's termed karmanauts. And then 73 of those are women too, and we need to have that ratio increased. That's my way of saying hello to Marty Winkle, my co-producer on this venture. Stay curious in our fourth year. Hi, Marty.
Hey, Mark. Hey, Mike.
Hey, Marty.
Well, we've gotten to know Mike, going out there and getting autographs, and him visiting our museum, and we hope we made a good friend in him here, because we love keeping the shuttle era alive. The American Space Museum for over 20 years has been preserving the birth of America's space age in what we call its delivery room, Brevard County. And we're just 9 miles from those shuttles, and we're so grateful that these loud rockets are going off in the middle of the night again down here. Business is good. But I'm going to let Mike talk. Just want to say his 4 missions, twice a commander, twice a pilot. But he spent 4 or 5 years in Star City, Baikonur, managing for NASA. The situation is going up there, and at our end of our program, we've got some pictures he took of all that up there. But let's put this mem up here for you. There, Marty, there. Yeah. Make that big, and I just wanted to mention your missions there. STS-43 with another good friend of ours, Jim Adamson, and John Blaha. And John Blaha was your commander.
Correct.
And as we jump over to the last command you had, STS-81, John Blaha was your passenger.
Yes.
You brought him back from the Mir space station. How cool is that?
That's very cool.
Did you and John have a moment up there at the Mir where, I mean, you being a rookie pilot and him your commander, and then 6 years later, you're bringing him back as an Uber driver.
Yeah, John was very excited about his whole long duration mission on the Mir. He was excited to be able to, really learn how to live in space and take showers and all that stuff. So he was happy. He was really anxious to tell people about his experience.
Uh-huh. Did you guys have a moment there where now you're you're the boss like I was.
Yeah, we talked about that a little bit, I think, as I recall, but
Yeah.
didn't dwell on it too much.
Well,
But it was definitely interesting.
I have pleasure to meet him. He's a
Yeah.
very interesting man.
Move the table closer to Mike.
Okay, all righty. We'll move it a little bit closer so we can
Okay.
get our volume up there. And then in between there, you had two very interesting missions. The TDRS satellite deployment that we talked about on our STS-70 mission there, because that's what they deployed. Very important to our communications. And then you're involved with the Italian laser Lagos system on there. And then 68 was the Space Radar Laboratory. And we were talking about how that has mapped a lot of places on Earth that were unknown basically then, right?
Yeah.
And your first command of that, we're not going to name all the astronauts, but did you fly with any of the crewmen twice?
Jeff Wiseoff, some of my third and fourth missions.
Okay.
together.
All right.
And then I guess John, we have to count John on 1.5.
Yeah, right. Blaha. Yeah, you brought him home on there. Look at those patches. Our Stay Curious watchers know that we love talking about the patches. No coincidence that the Mercury capsule's the outline of your first mission, and you got to meet Gordon Cooper's daughter the other day.
Yeah, she was here at the visitor center.
Yeah.
That was interesting. She brought a letter from her that I had written her dad prior to STS-43, just informing him, that, hey, we're flying on the 30th anniversary of Alan Shepard's flight and the first flight of the Mercury program. I guess the first flight. And first manned flight, anyway.
Yeah.
Get my history straight. But yes, I think that whole story is kind of interesting. So it was the 30th anniversary. We decided to make the patch in the shape of the Mercury capsule. And then I found out that the Mercury guys did not have any flown patches because they didn't, I don't know exact reason of that. They didn't have patches when they flew. Their patches were developed after
Right,
their
exactly.
flights.
The individual companies kind of devised a patch.
So we
to go
gathered
around.
all those patches together, enough to give to the crew members, and we carried them in space. And then when we got back, we delivered them to the crew members.
And you had that letter that you wrote her that she's gotten. That's you've autographed a lot of things, seen a lot of things to autograph. And I'm going to jump around here. Some things stick in your head that people wanted you to autograph that was kind of outside the box, Mike?
No, not really. Even just recently had a golf ball. Of course, shirts, T-shirts that people are wearing on their back, which is, you have to be a little careful of.
You do. We're talking with astronaut Mike Baker. Here's his 4 missions up there.
Yeah, it's also very difficult to actually sign on cloth like that.
Yeah, it is. Yeah,
At least I find
absolutely.
it difficult.
Well, like I said, it's a fun thing. There's just like sports heroes and movie stars. That's who we are as the space community.
Right.
Is I'm sitting beside one of 602 human beings that have orbited this Earth in the history of the world, or like Hugh Harris used to say, the history of all eternity, right, Marty?
All eternity.
Yeah,
That's
from
right.
all eternity. God bless Hugh Harris, who's been on our show here and passed away in February. But Mike, how about those other patches? I'm very involved with the memorabilia. That 81 patch being a V, that's really kind of strange to even handle.
Yeah, it does. I mean, we got a lot of jokes about that, like bikini bottoms.
Oh, a bikini bottom. Okay.
But I mean, it's shaped like
Now we know the inspiration of that.
shaped like a Roman numeral 5 because it was the 5th docking mission with the Russian space station.
There we
and of
go.
course, I mean, it's pretty simple. We got that and the American flag, the Russian flag, silhouette of the mirror in the background, and the shuttle launching to the mirror.
Beautiful.
And
Yeah.
that's
yeah.
pretty much it.
Was this an exercise that of the crew putting together a patch?
Yeah, it's something I didn't like necessarily.
Okay.
And then on my first flight, I was responsible for the design of that one. Essentially the pilot on the flight was put in charge of the patch.
Uh-huh.
And then my second mission.
Well, I like the second one because I love the star and the.
Bill Shepard was on that crew, and he had a lot of input on that.
Mm-hmm.
And I wanted to highlight that we had a Canadian on board because we flew the Space Vision system, which was developed by the Canadians and to use with the Canadian arm to put objects together in space that we actually couldn't see because they're so big, just like the space station. And so that was a fun mission. So there's a little Canadian, maple leaf on there somewhere. It's kind of hard to see from here.
Yeah.
And
Neat.
I think Shep liked the fact that it had a star on it, so it looked like we're sheriffs.
Oh, right, like your sheriff. See, I hadn't even thought about that. And I regularly use this book to talk about some of the patches. And I was looking at this one real quick, if I could. It's interesting how they get out of order, of course. But
Yeah.
we emphasize the artwork because there might be a boy or a girl out there that's very talented in art, and they can find their way to work in the space program,
Yeah,
right,
no, the
Mike?
graphic artists. We had some nice graphic artists at Johnson Space Center that would help out if we asked them to.
Uh-huh.
And
Yeah.
I think I got some help with the colors, those blue colors on the first one. On the third one, that's the Space Radar Lab is, the SRL2, Space Radar Lab 2 is supposed to be like the radar beams,
Mm-hmm. Oh, gotcha. Yeah.
emanating
going
down and bouncing off the Earth there.
Huh. Interesting.
And then we also had the 3 flags of the countries that were involved, which I think was Germany, Italy, and the United States in this particular payload.
Right there on the right-hand
Yeah.
side. Good. Well, there's a nice little art lesson from astronaut Mike Baker. We talk a lot about what I've learned, because I've learned a lot in the 4 years we were doing this program. I didn't know squat about the shuttle program to compare what I know now. And, you're usually twice a pilot, and then you're eligible to be a commander. There's a few of them that were once a pilot and then a commander, and like Lauren Shriver, and some of those it's just because they're the only one available in the queue type of thing.
Yeah, well, obviously, at the beginning of the shuttle program, we had to have commanders, guys that hadn't flown before, so
Right.
they flew their first time in the shuttle as commanders, and then some of their guys that flew as pilots, they flew once, and then they flew as commanders, and then by the time they got to our group, I think our group was kind of the first group that ended up flying twice as pilots because at that point in time we had a lot of commanders. That we're still trying
Well,
to
let's
fly.
look at that group there since we're talking
So-
about that. There's I don't often see a patch, Mike, of the crew. You're group 11
each
there.
group had their own patches that they put
Okay.
together, different group names. We were not very imaginative, I guess, because we didn't have a really good name for our astronaut group.
Well, no, I looked it up because I got into my library stuff
Yeah.
there. The hairballs were the one before you, and
Hairball.
they're supposed to name the next group,
No,
right?
and
they didn't have a name for
the
your
maggots were before us.
Okay, the maggots.
Hairballs,
right.
I guess, were
Yeah, there you go.
after
Hairballs
us.
after that.
And
But
we
you
didn't-
guys don't really
we
have a
didn't-
name, huh?
Yeah, we didn't really have a
Is it 85 for 1985?
1985.
Okay, that's what I thought. So the space shuttle program was roaring up and going there. There's your crew there. You flew with Jernigan's husband, didn't you?
Yeah.
Yeah. Bob
Flew
Cabana.
with Tammy Jernigan, flew with Jeff Wiseoff. They
Yeah.
weren't married at the time, of course.
Right.
Um,
Let's see. Sam Gamars. He gives a lot out to Space Center on
Yeah.
there.
yeah.
And of course Bob Cabana, like
Yep.
you, twice a pilot, twice a commander in the early days
Yep.
of the shuttle. And Bob did such a great job 12 years at
Yeah.
KSC,
Yeah, he did.
changing it to the way it is there. So, well, tell us a little bit about, we talked a little bit about your career there. Tell us a little bit about where you grew up and how you got involved. And you were in the Navy, flying those Corsair.
Yeah,
on
I
aircraft
get asked the
carriers.
question a lot about, what I want to do or how I got to where I am and how, when did I want to be an astronaut and all that sort of thing. But my dad was in the Navy. He was in Navy aviation. He was an aviation electronics technician. And he met my mom and he was at A school in NAS Millington in Memphis.
Mm-hmm.
And so I guess 3 of us were born there. And so I don't know exactly. I guess somewhere when I was 2 years old, we left there. We went to Los Alamitos and near Long Beach, California. And then after that, he got assigned to NAS Barbers Point in Hawaii. So we went there before it was a state in the mid-50s, I guess.
Oh, wow.
And it became a state when I was in first grade there. I remember, they marched us outside, raised the flag.
Is that right?
Then
In Honolulu or?
In Barbers Point.
Okay, Barbers Point.
And we went, so after that, we went to NAS Glenview in Chicago. And so I went like first through fourth grade, just started fifth grade when we went to Naval Air Station Lemoore, California. So I kind of consider Lemoore my hometown. I grew up there basically went from fifth grade through high school. My dad's still there. We got there in '63. My dad's still there.
Mm-hmm.
So that's really hometown for us.
All right.
Where I grew up.
Well, that's nice to always go back to your hometown and have a hometown, I guess.
Yeah.
Particularly when you start growing up as a Navy or military kid, going all over the place there. Well, you ended up, as we'll say, hook 'em horns.
Yes.
Went to the University of Texas.
Yes. Yeah. I think as far back as I can remember, I wanted to be a naval aviator.
Uh-huh.
And how I ended up at UT is a kind of a longer story too. I can talk about it if you want.
Well, sure, if it's interesting to us out there, sure.
I had talked to the pilots of my dad's squadron. And they kind of suggested that I apply for the Naval Academy. And I always say, it's important to have backup plan, So
Right.
I applied for the Naval Academy. I applied for the Air Force Academy, and I applied for the Navy ROTC program. And in the spring of my senior year, when about the same time I received notification that I was accepted by all of those three organizations, I broke my elbow snow skiing. And when that happened, I had to tell them, I had to tell the Naval Academy and the Air Force Academy about the change in my medical status. And when I told them that, the Naval Academy came back right away and said I was medically disqualified. Air Force Academy was a little bit nicer. They said, why don't you give us weekly updates from your doc and we'll see how it goes. And that's when I had to do some searching and soul searching, so to speak. Deep down in my heart, I knew I didn't want to be in the Air Force.
Okay.
Hope that doesn't offend anybody. But so I told
Just all those Purdue graduates.
so I told the Air Force Academy, that's all right, don't worry about it. And I went back through my Navy ROTC paperwork. I couldn't find anything in there that said to notify him of a change in my medical status, so I didn't. But then I had to hustle trying to find a university to go to. And if you know anything about the ROTC program, basically it's one university per state that has it.
Oh, really? Okay.
Some states have two universities. California, I mean, it would have made some sense, I suppose, if I went to like USC or UCLA in California, but I wanted to get further away from home, and I didn't necessarily want to live in Los Angeles.
Mm-hmm.
I thought about places like MIT, nice engineering school, right? But it was on the East Coast, which was very unfamiliar to me.
Mm-hmm.
And kind of way too far away from home. So I started looking a little bit closer. I looked at Arizona and New Mexico universities, and they didn't have aerospace engineering at the time. They do now. So I ended up looking in Texas. Texas had two schools, Texas A&M and the University of Texas.
Mm-hmm.
And back then, this was 1971, Texas A&M had like 15,000 students, and they were all males.
Oh my gosh.
So I said, well, that's
Nah,
an easy.
I ain't going there.
I think I'll apply for the University of Texas. So I ended up going to the University of Texas, which is, I didn't know anything about Texas. We had driven through the Panhandle, going back and forth to Memphis, Tennessee to visit my mom's relatives from California. And so we showed up there. My mom and dad dropped me off, kicked me out of the car. And there it was. I had a great experience, great engine, it's a great engineering school, good education. They've always been in the top 10 engineering schools in the country. So I was very happy the way things turned out.
What other astronauts are from there? I don't know off the top of my head.
Oh boy,
to put you
Ken
on
Cockrell,
spot.
Bob Crippen, Carl Meade.
Okay.
Um,
Do they have a little?
Stephanie Wilson.
Oh, Stephanie Wilson. Okay.
Yeah.
She's an Artemis astronaut still. I
Yeah,
think.
she got her master's.
Do they honor you there in some hall of honor there? Or
I was quite a long time ago now. I was selected as what they call a young, outstanding young Texas X,
Oh,
which
do
is
you?
kind of like a distinguished alumni for the young, slightly younger group of people. And then just recently, they awarded me this distinguished alumni at the university. The Engineering College of Engineering.
Well, part of your Navy career is over 300 landings on aircraft carriers there. So you can only tell me about one.
We got a lot of them actually. That's fairly standard for getting about 300 carrier landings for a tour of duty. So most of the guys, if they end up being commanding officers, it's kind of a big deal to get to 1,000.
Okay. All right.
So that's fairly standard to have that many. I actually have a lot more than that. When I was as a test pilot, I was assigned to the carrier suitability branch of the test directorate, and we did a lot of touch and goes, which they don't count.
Oh, really? Okay. Well, it should.
I probably got another, it seems like 300 touch and goes.
In what aircraft again? That
A7.
Oh, the
Corsair.
A7 there. And for you aircraft buffs out there, I know Tom Usiak's a private pilot in his day, and we know that Dave Stangy's enjoying this up in Michigan. We got people all over the world watching Mike Baker today. We've got Cliff Watson is in Pomona, Australia, enjoying breakfast down there whenever he's watching this. We've got a faithful watcher, Robert Law, is in Dundee, Scotland, enjoying his cocktail when we're on there. Ophelia is in Normandy, Scotland. I mean, no, she's in Normandy, France. In there.
Yeah.
So, we're proud of what we've developed here to get people around the world, Lily, listening to us as we talk about space history and occasional astronaut interview here with Mr. Mike Baker. Let's go to a little bit of your, let me kick that up there. Look at a couple pretty pictures of you there. And we've got Anita in the background here. Anita, would you mind turning that air conditioning back on, please? We're getting a little stuffy here.
It is a little bit. You're
We
right.
got in there. So you told me you're not a private pilot, but you've flown all these aircraft from even vertical takeoff and landing craft, rotary wing. Wikipedia says 50 aircraft in there, whatever they know. What's your favorite? What are some of the favorite winged vehicles you've flown?
Well, my favorite was what I flew operationally was the A7. That was a great airplane. And some of the other ones, when I was at Empire Test Pilot School as an instructor, we got to fly a lot of nice airplanes. Through the Hunter aircraft and Jaguar, Hawk, they're just fun airplanes in general. But the A7 was my airplane.
All right. There you are getting suited up there for, that's your last mission. So, I mean, did any thoughts going through there one last time? Or did you know this was your last time, 81?
I thought it was probably my last time, yeah.
I said to you privately that I felt you were not lucky, but kind of fortunate in a way. You had 4 flights in 3 to 6 years.
Yeah.
Some people waited for 6 years between flights and that sort of thing.
Yeah, they were coming fast and furious for some reason. I got assigned my second flight the day I landed off my first one, and would have been nice to have a little bit more time off.
What's the biggest jump from being a pilot to a commander?
Not much of one, really.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you kind of get the same training. You're just sitting in a different seat now and responsible for a little bit different systems. And, of course, you're going to be flying the machine.
Did you take any interest in maybe something that was anomalies that you felt needed attention? I say that because Eileen Collins has written in her book that she, asked for the SRB engines to be looked at, for example, on separation, that there's some, but you didn't do anything.
No.
But you were the commander. You could have said, hey, I want you to make that blue, make it black. Right?
Oh, no, we try not to do that kind of thing too much.
All right. You don't seem like the guy that would want to do that kind of thing. But there you are floating in space, Bakes. Something you'll probably never forget, I'm sure.
Yeah. I use that in my presentation just as the beginning of looking, talking about a lot of Earth observation, which is, I think any astronaut will tell you the best thing about flying in space is looking out a window at our beautiful planet.
How concerned were you about getting UV radiation, like a sunburn, or was it windows
The shuttle, they had UV protection in the windows.
Okay. Well, never asked anybody about that. There's your handsome official picture there at NASA, your Mach 25 patch. Those are worth $400 every day, by the way, from an astronaut. So, Marty, we really enjoyed the panel for the 10th anniversary of the shuttle that you participated in. That was one of the better things I've seen as a space geek. And, I remember you looking up, and I got a picture of you pointing up like that going, I can't believe I spent 20 days in that spaceship up there.
That display that they have, they did such a magnificent job. It really did. And you feel like you can almost touch it, and then it's just out of reach, And you can see it from every angle. And it's very special to see something like that sitting in a museum where you can go visit it that you spent 20 days, like I said, on.
Well, that was really a good
Orbiting the
panel
Earth,
there. The panel, they had Chris Ferguson, you were beside Chris, then Bill Shepard was there, Anna Fisher, and Mike Mullane.
Guy Gardner.
And Guy Gardner. I'm leaving out Guy Gardner. And have you ever watched Guy Gardner do his talk out there?
I haven't.
You might as well be in his physics class, okay? He's throwing that. He's asking you for adjectives, what you think space feels like, and all that stuff. He's very, very entertaining. So are you. You've got a good way of getting your point across out there without, talking about too much of the nuts and bolts. You like talking about people participating and getting involved in there. I wanted to ask you, we were talking about that. Marty, you got anything to ask him about that 10th anniversary of Atlantis? The only disappointment was us where there wasn't an autograph session and a real photo session with everybody there. And, of course, our friend John Zarella does an excellent job.
Yeah, he does.
Doing those things. Have you eaten the lasagna at John's place?
I have.
Yeah, pretty good stuff.
I like going there, actually. Yeah.
Right. Marty, do you have a question? I was going to segue into your Russian involvement here. What would you like Stay Curious people to know about the space shuttle and your involvement in it?
Wow. Well, no, the space shuttle was, I think John Young said this once and wrote it down on a picture that he signed. It's like, the space shuttle was just a magnificent flying machine. Incredible thing to fly. It's so lucky to have had a chance to do that. Chance to dock it to the Russian space station. A chance to land it a couple of times. One here at Kennedy Space Center, one out at Edwards Air Force Base. It's just magnificent to be able to do that. And it's very sad to me that I don't know if we're going to see a spacecraft that's as capable as that for some long time, if ever.
Well, your former commander and then passenger John Blaha in his talk out there says he thinks it'll be 100 years before we'd have a space plane this large and a lot of it's because of the management of it.
Right.
In there, very complex thing to manage and so forth in there. You were in, like we talked about, Endeavor. Have you seen it out in California?
I have not.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
You know what they're doing to
Actually,
it. They're
Atlantis.
gonna put it vertical.
Yeah, it's good.
And you've been I've seen Discovery with
That's
wheels
going to
down.
be magnificent. When you see the external tank and the solid rocket boosters out here at KSC Visitor Center, I can imagine, having a real orbiter standing on top of it.
I know it. What about the personalities of them? You were commander of Atlantis and Endeavor, and then you're pilot of Atlantis and Columbia. A lot of us get in different rental cars. So
Right.
is it like just kind of hopping into or do they really have different personalities?
They're
or
pretty
nuances?
much the same, I
Okay.
think.
All
in
right.
my
Well, you're
mind.
the pilot and commander. That's what we want to
Yeah,
know.
just like being in a squadron, you had squadron would have like 12, 14 airplanes, and you just one of them might have had your name on the side of it, but you flew whatever came up.
Oh, is that right? Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
And they are all the same, pretty much.
All right.
Same. I think the shuttles were the same. Columbia was the only one that was actually different. It had an extra instrumentation because it was the first space shuttle that flew, so it was a little heavier. Not much, but it was a little bit heavier, and it also had an extra instrument panel in the aft flight deck that was for the instrumentation.
Okay. That's I mean, it's kind of reassuring about how well they were built and so forth.
Yeah.
That they were really copied very well on there. Well, we're talking with astronaut Mike Baker here. We're going to end our segment with him of Stay Curious, is talking about your experience in a very important role for NASA in Russia when the only access to our International Space Station, built by 35 shuttle missions, was the Uber of the Soyuz spacecraft.
Yeah.
And so share with us a little bit about, Mike, how long you were there, some of your duties there, as we look at, as you explain this picture to us.
Yeah, well, this was a crew arrival, and this was a little bit unusual because normally they would fly the Tupolev 134. Star City had two of those airplanes, but they also had this airplane's Ilyushin 76. And for some reason, the Tupolev 134 must have been down.
Yeah.
So they were using the Ilyushin 76. I don't remember exactly why. So, whenever the crew arrived in Baikonur, was always met by an entourage of people, some fairly high-level people like the mayor. The lady on the right, or the left, excuse me, was the director of the Cosmonaut Hotel.
That's you behind her with the
That's
shades
her, me
on.
on the far left, yeah. We had a couple other cosmonauts there, Pavel Vinogradov, second from the right. Yeah, so it was always a fun time when, just everybody would take an opportunity to take pictures with the crew on arrival, and then we'd head off to the Cosmonaut Hotel, which is the crew quarters, basically.
You were basically the key person there for NASA, right?
Yeah.
To deal with Roscosmos. Of course, it wasn't Roscosmos then, was it?
Yeah, it was Roscosmos.
Okay.
Yes, a lot of people mix this up a little bit. The DOR, we called him DOR, was the person that we had in Star City. Was the Director of Operations Russia, which was a job I did in 1995. And he lived in Star City and supported our astronauts that were in training there. And we had a small little office with a couple of interpreters and support people that also were trying to help, make sure the astronaut had everything they needed while they were training. And back in '95, there was a lot of care that was needed by the crew because it was just, things were different then. Now all things are available very easily, and it's easy to get around and all that stuff. So people they don't need quite as much support as they did back in the '95 time frame. And then that's when I came back I was there for about a year in Star City, and I came back in after my last flight, actually. And actually, when I came back from that, I flew my last flight, and the fourth flight was the docking mission with the Russian space station Mir. And then when I came back from that, I remember telling my boss at the time was Mr. Abbey, and I said, we don't really have the infrastructure in place in Moscow to support phase 2, which is construction of the space station together with our Russian partners. So he said, go fix it. And I said, no, that's not really what I meant.
No.
I said, I already did my year in Moscow, but after some thought and some persuasion, I guess, I went ahead and accepted his offer and went back to Moscow and set up our organization in support of the space station program. And so we have a small group of people in Star City that supports the crew. We have what we call a Moscow Technical Liaison Office, which is a group of people that liaise with the Russian aerospace industry, with Energia, with blanking right now,
Yeah.
the other main company, Krunichev and Energia, were the main companies that we interfaced with, and so they were liaisoning with them. Like I said, we had another group that was in mission control. So we had a bunch of flight controllers, so that was a separate group from Star City, a separate group from MTLO. And then we had what I call an admin group that had all the support we needed. We had drivers, we had interpreters, we had a lot of people. And then my office was co-located at that point in time with the Russian Space Agency, or Roscosmos.
Hmm.
And I had a very long title. I was Assistant Center Director at Johnson Space Center. I was the Director of Human Spaceflight Programs for Russia.
Well, I think that's an amazing story of what you did there, and I think I'm more impressed about it than you are living it, because you're very humble
it was
about
a
your
really great job.
responsibilities there.
It was a great job.
You really were part of this, keeping the continuity to our International Space Station with American astronauts riding these cramped, tiny Soyuz spacecraft.
Yeah, well, we started off. I guess Bill Shepard flew on the Soyuz as first crew that went to the station, and we at some point we were flying some crew members on this Soyuz, but not very many, I think. And then we were flying some. Actually, we were flying most of our guys on the shuttle. Sometimes we were flying cosmonauts on the shuttle. And then when we had the Columbia accident, we kind of lost our capability to get anybody to and from the station, and that's when we started, flying the Soyuz. And that's when they came to me. I'd been back from Moscow for about a year and a half when the accident happened, and I was I always say I was kind of like the Russian go-to guy, because I was most experienced with our Russian partners, and they asked me to put together all of this launch and entry integration for all of the partners and astronauts. And so I said, sure, I'll do that. So I kind of did that for all the way till I retired at the beginning of 2017.
Did you ever climb inside a Soyuz spacecraft to check it out?
Oh yeah, yes. It's very small.
Claustrophobic. Huh?
Very, very, very small.
Yeah, you see all of them packed
Very
in there and
cramped,
everything.
yes.
But it's been 40 years, a tried and true spaceship, and you got to give it to the Russians. Comment like you have to me off camera about their approach to building spacecraft versus ours in rockets.
Yeah, I think just the kind of the Western world in general, we like on our side, we like to use new technology, kind of make it complicated as possible, so to speak.
Yeah.
Which I think is very admirable in a lot of respects. But at the same, they're on this far other end of the spectrum, where they've got stuff that they build very robustly. It works well, in their mind is, if it's working well, why mess with it? Leave it alone. And so they'll keep these same designs for a long, long time because it works. Why not? That's the way their system works. I think it'd be nice. It's better in the middle somewhere, perhaps. But it's, I always used to say, if they're going to launch, if they say they're going to launch something at 6 a.m. On February 1st to 2024, guess what? On 6 a.m. and February 1st, 2024, it launches. I don't care what the weather is, what the temperature is, or what's going on, it launches. It's just, you can't say the same thing.
Whether it's storming out or snowing, they're going to launch, huh?
Yeah.
Wow. What's the mindset? We've only got to get 10 miles out of this stuff and we're clear? Or
They didn't really have a lot of the limitations that we had on the space shuttle. Of course, they didn't have to land. They didn't have to have, a lot of the restrictions for the space shuttle that kept us from launching a lot of times was return to launch site weather.
Yeah. Huh.
Did
you ever go over any of the TAL sites, transoceanic?
Yeah, I did. That was a lot of fun.
I saw Dean Schaff today.
Yeah.
You remember Dean? He was one of the Gomzo.
Yeah.
Ground. And I always tease him of having such a great job going to Morocco.
Yeah.
With a net to catch the shuttle over there.
Yeah, I got to
Spain,
go to Ben Gurir and to Banjul and the Gambia.
Yeah. There's some stories about those places.
Just outside of Seville and Morone.
Yeah, these are the transoceanic abort landing sites that the shuttle we had to have in case one of those engines got lost, and you trained for that a lot, I'm sure, about that. But
they sent pilots over there to make sure to fly weather reconnaissance, basically, and make sure the runways and navigational aids were ready to receive the shuttle.
Well, let's look at a couple other pictures here as we're talking with astronaut Mike Baker. I'm holding his pictures that he's going to offer at a future auction, signed by some of the astronauts and principal people. They got winter coats on in this one. This big mural is part of this whole thing.
Yeah,
this is in Baikonur, right?
Right. Yeah, it's a nice Soviet-era, mosaic artwork. It's a beautiful artwork, I think. It's on the outside wall of the Cosmonaut Hotel in Baikonur. And one of the things that I always enjoyed most was once the crew got there after the first couple of days or so, they would they'd have the flag raising ceremony where they'd raise flags of all the crew members, countries' crew members. So we'd raise an American flag, a Russian flag, and if we had a European with us or another partner astronaut, we'd raise their flag. And then after that little ceremony, everybody from the operational team, they call it, would get together and we'd have a picture taken. And then all the crew members would sign it.
And in there, you've got the mayor, the police chief, fire chief.
Yeah.
And I'm going to show another one here.
Yeah.
Well, no, I've got a launch there. I'll show you another one there in a minute. We'll go back to that. I was just saying, everybody's in on the action that you have to deal with as the infrastructure
Yes.
of this, as well as the backup crew.
Yep. We had representatives from Energia, from the city of Baikonur, the mayor, usually, or deputy mayor.
Mike's got these montages of a Soyuz launch there. That one's a night launch there with it being erected and the ways that they handle things. There's another one of those cool pictures in the warmer weather there.
Yeah.
In there, you see in the blue suits, left there's the prime crew, and then the secondary crews over there. Is trying to see
Backup
what
crew, yeah. I can't make
American
out who it is
astronauts
right
on there. I don't think that's Ron Garan. He was one. And then you have these little montages of all the rituals. There's Katie Coleman by my thumb there playing her flute. They have different sort of rituals and that they.
Yeah, those are just photos of all the 2 weeks. They go to Baikonur 2 weeks before launch, so you spend a lot of time there.
Okay, but they bring the crews out and they're above your head. They're standing on these squares and presented with flowers and all that kind. We don't do that stuff with shuttle people.
No, they have a lot of
get dressed in the ONC and jump in the van and.
They had a lot of traditions that they go through. Yeah.
What did you think about that?
That's great. I think. Yeah.
And they honor the past like nobody else.
Yeah, great.
So you're one of the few crews that honored the Mercury astronauts with your capsule in there. So, well, there's Mike Baker there. We're enjoying this conversation with you, looking at some of the pictures from Baikonur there. I just think it's kind of an underestimated. What I've learned about you is this Russian connection of yours. You really were somebody that facilitated America's presence there, and how you conducted yourself has been impressionable to them, I think, the world community. So 20 years later, you speed up there, and we've got 3 Russians on the space station with United Emirates man and 3 Americans, 3 Chinese in their Tiangong space station. No women up there right now, Mike, but Jasmine Mowgli's going to solve that when she's commander of SpaceX Crew Dragon 7 in August, a rookie commander, by the way, Marine too, Marty. Hoorah, Jasmine Mongoli. So what's your take on the climate of today?
The good news is I think that we have their partnership with our Russian partners is going strong. We still have a group of people, NASA folks in Moscow at the Mission Control Center, and we still have people training out at Star City. I think it's actually a testament to the partnership. We've been working for a long time trying to get the Russians to agree to always fly a Russian on our spacecraft and always fly an American on their spacecraft. And I think it was September we finally got agreement to do that, and everybody signed the agreement. And so now we're going to fly an American on the Soyuz all the time, and they'll fly a Russian cosmonaut on our spacecraft. That way we can assure that we always, no matter what happens to the spacecraft, whether Soyuz has a problem or Crew Dragon has a problem, we'll always have at least 1 American and 1 Russian on board the station, which is kind of almost a requirement.
That's good. That's good. And whatever happens here on the ground up in space, you know better than anybody else, and 601 other people that orbited.
Right.
You got to depend on each other as human beings, right?
Yeah, definitely.
in there. Marty gave me a note here that he was kind of curious about when did you decide you wanted to be an astronaut? Was it when landing one of those Corsairs in the middle of a moonlit night and almost missing the deck? And
Well, you know, I don't really know the answer to that question, I guess. And Anita made me think. One of my good buddies always that I went to university with, he said he'd always tell people that he knew later that this guy told me he was going to be an astronaut when he was in college, and he did it. But I don't really remember doing that.
Oh, okay.
I always say that I wanted to be a naval aviator forever,
Uh-huh.
and of course I was like 16 when they landed on the moon, and I had an interest in that, of course. And then when I went to test pilot school, I kind of had all the requirements that I met all the requirements, qualifications.
Mm-hmm.
And it seemed like the next logical step in my career. And plus, I went to test pilot school. It was 1981, which is the first year that we flew the space shuttle. And so there was a lot of people talking about and people that had just left the test flight center to come to Houston to be in the astronaut office. And so I thought that would be like the next logical step.
Were you rejected or get in the first
No, I mean,
time?
this is a part of the story I like to tell too. I was an instructor at the Empire Test Pilot School. It was an exchange tour with the Royal Navy, which is the best job I've ever had in my life. Sometimes my NASA bosses would get mad when I would say that.
You
But
like training?
it really was. It was a great job, and I went there in '83. So to back up a little bit, so they had the first space shuttle selection in '78. And then they skipped a year. They had the next one in '80, and then they skipped 3 years. The next one was in 1984. And so in 1984, I was an instructor at Empire Test Pilot School. Like I said, it was the best job I ever had. And so I didn't want to leave, so I didn't apply in '84, which I found out later was probably stupid.
Okay.
There was no guarantee that they were going to have a selection in '85, '86, or even '87, as far as that goes. But I was lucky that they had a selection in '85. So I went ahead and applied, even though it was still a little bit too early, because I ended up leaving the Empire Test Pilot School after about a year and 9 months, which was too short.
Too short.
And that's kind of some funny stuff too, because when I told them when I got notification that I was selected, typical NASA, they gave us like 4 weeks. They said they told me the 1st of June that I was selected, and then they wanted us there the 1st of July. And here I am overseas. If you know anything about the military and overseas, change of station orders and all of that stuff, and getting movers and packed up and everything, it was darn near impossible, especially from overseas, and especially in the kind of exchange tour. I didn't have any a base that could support me. So it was very difficult. Plus, when I told my boss at the Empire Test Pilot School, he said, "Well, we can't let you go." I remember I called back to NASA. I said, "They're not going to let me go."
Okay.
Because
Did you tell him we want you to be an astronaut? Did you mention that to him?
But see, there was only 3 instructors.
Uh-huh.
And I was one of them.
Wow.
And so I was, 1/3 of their teaching staff. But they scrambled and they found somebody to take my place.
Well, that's a good story. That's a good kind of reluctant astronaut there. Like not quite like Don Knotts, the reluctant astronaut that movie. Well, I've got one kind of final question here. That you're commanding the space shuttle, 2,000 toggle switches, dials, stuff like that all over you. You got your glass cockpit finally in Atlantis, but the SpaceX Crew Dragon has none of that. It's just got a couple consoles up there. In there.
I didn't get the
What do you think
shuttle
about
with the glass cockpit either.
Oh, you didn't? Okay. Well, my question is, what's the reassurance about that? Does a pilot want a couple manual switches in there because this spacecraft doesn't have any?
Yeah, I think it makes some folks a little uncomfortable. It's nice I'm sure there's a few switches.
Okay.
But yeah, it's a all new thing. especially for some of the older guys, right?
Right.
You know, most new airplanes are like that too. And if you own a Tesla, that's just like a Tesla, right?
All right. Time will tell. Time will tell.
Yeah,
Well, it is like the Tesla, except it's a spaceship. So,
right, exactly.
in there. So, well, we have enjoyed this conversation with astronaut Mike Baker, and we're, of course, this is a recorded program. We will answer your comments that you've been putting on there, and I'm sure we'll have Mike back in the near future, as you really enjoy sharing your story out there at Kennedy Visitors Complex.
Yeah, I do.
You also do it at the Johnson Space Center where he lives. So if you're in Houston, you might catch him at one of their private events there. Mike, thank you so much.
Thank you, Mark.
To meet you
Appreciate
and
it.
make a friendship here, and how you've embraced our museum. Is there something you'd like to share that we haven't talked to you, asked you about?
No, I don't think so.
All right.
Thank you.
Well, you're very welcome. Marty, thanks for a great job there. And thank you all for watching Stay Curious, as you never know who's going to pop up. We're always welcoming our astronauts as well as space workers. In our opinion, they are all national treasures that we need to embrace, respect, and know more about. So until the next time, I'm Marquette saying we can't wait to see you again to bridge the space between us.